Hello, Thrive Nation. I've got a very special guest, Dr. Jamie Seeman, all the way from the US. She's a gynecologist, an obstetrician. She's a mother. She's a wife. She is an author. She's written a book. She's a podcaster, and she's an inspiration to so many people. I've been watching her for a long time, listened to her podcast, which is really, really cool, fit and fabulous. So welcome to the show.
It's so good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Brilliant. Now, give us a little bit of a backstory, what happened to your health, and a bit of sort of pain to purpose, how you moved into this very integrative sort of medicine that you do. I think it's really important for people to hear. Obviously, we've got Professor Tim Noakes, who's been on the show twice already here in South Africa, who's, pioneered the low carb, high fat diet, and a lot of the ketogenic stuff many, many years ago, and has been an example to so many doctors worldwide. But give us your backstory, Dr. Jamie.
So I grew up in Nebraska, which for those of you that don't know is very centrally located in the United States. We're like in the plains. So we grow a lot of corn and wheat here and a lot of cattle. We're in beef country as well. But I grew up as a 3-sport athlete, was playing lots of sports as a kid, was super busy, was a great student, and had aspirations of being a collegiate athlete. Eventually went on to the university where I was studying nutrition and exercise science because I thought if I didn't make it into medical school, it's so competitive that I would want to do something in the athletic world, maybe in the nutrition world. And so I start college and I'm getting my degree. I'm training at a very high level because I'm a collegiate athlete. And when I'm eating at what we call the training table where the athletes eat, really all they told us was, eat protein and eat the rainbow, eat your fruits and vegetables. That's what I had been told. And I go through my nutrition degree and it's very much, that fat is a major driver of cardiovascular disease and chronic metabolic diseases. And we have to control calories and we have to exercise more. So I finished my degree and I met my husband in college. We got married and I went off to medical school. And this was the first transition in my life where I went from being very physically active. I don't want to say forced to be physically active, but I was, required to train to be a collegiate athlete. And then now I'm in medical school and I'm very sedentary. I'm sitting in lectures for long hours. We have tests on Saturdays. I was still working out a little bit, but this was the first time in my life where I started to kind of struggle with maintaining my weight and body composition. So I went back to what I knew, which was eat less, move more. So I started keeping kind of like food. This was before you guys, there was like macro counters on your phone. I kept a paper and pencil notebook. Okay.
Yeah.
But I was just really tracking calories. Well, my husband and I wanted to start a family. So we achieved our first pregnancy during medical school, but it was not easy. It took us almost 9 months. I was told I had PCOS. I was offered metformin and Clomid, which is a medicine that helps women with PCOS ovulate. So we achieved our first pregnancy. I went on to have 2 more pregnancies. I had 3 children within like a 56-month time span. They're all 23 months apart. But I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism after my first daughter was born. And then eventually after my third daughter, I was diagnosed with prediabetes. So I come from a long family history of normal BMI diabetics. And this was like a rude awakening for me because here I am. I've got a medical degree. I've got a degree in nutrition and exercise science of all the people in the world that should know how to eat and move, right? It should be me. And I just saw how unhealthy the world was and how unhealthy our patients were and just how what I had learned in medicine really wasn't helping people. Like, is it that they're not doing it or we're just telling them the wrong thing? So I kind of went on this personal journey to figure out my own health. So I went back, I did an integrative medicine fellowship. I started to change my diet. I started a social media to kind of be accountable to the world as to what I was doing, just admitting that doctors are humans too. But it really not only transitioned my personal health, it transitioned everything in my life. It changed my marriage. It changed, my life as a mom. And it certainly changed the way that I practice medicine. So I can tell you today that I no longer have prediabetes. I am the healthiest I've ever been. I take no medications. I actually don't take many supplements. And I am really just on a mission to inspire the world and inspire, my 3 daughters that you really have a lot more control than you realize.
Sure. What a great story, inspirational story. You've obviously got an affiliation to the ketogenic diet. Was that the transitioning diet that sort of really helped you lower insulin, lose the fats, and obviously as you're training and you're eating a nutrient-dense diet, increasing your muscle mass? What was the key sort of driver
Well, I had watched my mom diet multiple times in my life, and she has, God bless her, lost and gained the same 100 pounds multiple times in her life. And I knew at one point she had done the Atkins diet. So I kind of thought, well, I'm her daughter, so maybe that would work. But I actually kind of started more like Whole30 and then transitioned into more of a paleo diet and realized I liked dairy and cheese, so I couldn't sustain a paleo diet. And so I settled on the ketogenic diet, and it was the first quote unquote diet in my entire life that I felt great. Like the weight, I don't want to say effortlessly came off, but my satiety was in control. I'd always been one of those people that was always hungry, always looking for my next meal, planned my day around when I was going to be able to eat again, got real hangry. Um, and so it kind of transitioned into a lifestyle. You know, I started to cut the carbs out, realized how good I felt. But then when I really started to say, okay, what does the literature show? Because I had physicians coming at me saying, I can't believe you're talking about this with your patients, this
Mm.
crazy diet that causes these, pathologic levels of ketones. And I mean, there was just so many misconceptions. And when I really started to kind of look at things, I'm like, I don't know. I think we have it wrong. This really makes sense. Remove dietary carbs. And most people say it's the processed foods, right? But what's in the processed foods? It's high calorie. It's usually a lot of carbs. It's usually low quality fats. So kind of the evolution when I started this in 2015, 2016, now all the way to 2023, that there is kind of an evolution of my ketogenic diet. I did kind of start eating, crappy keto foods. I think we
Yeah.
all have our vices and we try to find low carb versions of all the crappy things we ate before. And I was, a victim to that.
Yeah.
But it kind of transitioned into a very heavy meat-based carnivore diet in about 2018. And now it's kind of found its happy place. I eat a ton of beef, a ton of eggs. I eat some berries. I'll eat an occasional, salad. I'm not carnivore. I don't have gut issues. I don't think plants are harming my health at
Mm.
this moment. But I think that now that I'm at such a great body composition, I've been able to kind of play with like ketogenic versus low carb, adding in some sweet potatoes and kind of finding that happy place, because I really do feel working with so many patients that there is a time and place for therapeutic ketosis for some patients. And for a lot of other people, just a sustainable low carb diet is fantastic.
Brilliant. And I think it's crucially important how you've adapted it, that probably nutrition is probably one of the bespoke, unique areas of people's lives that they've got to experiment with regards to feeling good and looking at the numbers like body composition, looking at insulin. While you were at medical school and you realized this, and did you do a lot of blood tests, labs? You had studied integrative medicine. Did you just say, hang on, actually, I've got to measure my ketones. I've got to look at my HB alpha 1C, as a physician being here for 24 years, I'm trying to empower people to use data, obviously not get obsessed with it and develop orthorexia, but really use the data, understand the data, teach them so that they can play a little bit. And play is probably not the right word, but adapt it to their own genetics. Obviously, you might have a predisposition to become pre-diabetic and have high insulin. So what were your thoughts on using data?
Well, I think you always wish you had more data, especially when you get to a really good place. You're like, dang, I wish I would have known multiple years ago what these numbers look like. And I think when you're at your worst and you feel your worst, you don't want anybody to check, right? It's like
Mm,
this forced accountability, like here's
yeah.
your numbers, look at these numbers. But really honestly, it was mostly that I didn't really think there was anything wrong with me. I just thought that when you're a doctor and you have 3 small children and your husband's a police officer and he works at night, that you're just supposed to be tired and you're just supposed to feel meh. I mean, I wasn't like overtly sick, right? I was just kind of not optimal.
Yeah.
And I was the one that actually finally asked my doctor. I wasn't in a time and place in my career to just draw, as many labs as I want. And so, but I'm the one that actually said, I think we should check an A1C. Because I knew I'd had this thyroid dysfunction. I knew I had a family history, but now I'm a total nerd. Of course, I check my ketones. I've worn CGMs. I check my labs very regularly. And I will occasionally find things that are off. I did genetic testing on myself and found out I had an MTHFR mutation. And one time I was like, I think I'm going to add a homocysteine onto my labs. Holy crap, my homocysteine was over 10. Like, got to add more liver and more folate in, got to drive this back down. So, we can't always assume. I think the biggest thing is we can't assume just looking at people how healthy they are. And when it comes to diet, I don't care if you're vegan or carnivore or somewhere in between. If you feel good and you're thriving and metabolically, your labs and markers and everything look good, fantastic. Eat whatever diet makes you feel that way and makes you healthy. But for the vast majority of people, that's just not the case.
Yeah.
They're falling into these little traps and things, and they really actually don't want to take responsibility for it. They just want a quick fix. And this really has to be, a long-term vision for me. My kind of mantra now is called Hard to Kill. I wrote a book with the title. It's that is like what I live by, that I'm going to take responsibility for what I can control. And the rest of it is just what it is. And whatever amount of time I have left here, I'm here for it.
Brilliant. And that's, what a story. And I want to go through your life, talk about exercise and look at the longevity sort of research on, zone 2, zone 5, cardiovascular exercise, how important that is, overrated cardiovascular exercise. I've been listening to your podcast, what you've said about it, how important strength training is, and how important it is to ensure that especially women, do a lot of strength training and ensure their body composition is good, because a lot of them are skinny fat with high levels of sort of visceral adipose tissue, which is not healthy. So let's go through maybe a week. I mean, I know you're still delivering babies as an obstetrician.
Yeah.
I mean, it's maybe not so regular, but you're probably getting 3-4 sessions at least. And for the women that we sort of have at Made to Thrive, we do a lot of corporate executive work, CEOs, small, medium enterprises. They just keep on telling me, I've got kids, got to take them to school. I've got a lot of pressure. I've got to make it work. When can I exercise? They don't have the time to prepare their meals. So that's why I say you're quite an inspiration, because you've got 3 small little girls and you've got a career. So take us through, number one, your exercise or movement regime. Include even things like steps, how important you think daily steps are. But give us an overall view on health and wellness with regards to exercise.
Well, the most important thing I'm going to say is that if there's a mom listening that's got kids and a career and things like that, for years of my life, it was, my kids and my family and my career, and I have to be at work at this time and come home at this time. And because I didn't take care of myself, I felt like crap. So any extra time I had, the last thing I wanted to do, was go exercise. And if you don't enjoy something, let me tell you right now, you might stick with it for a short period of time, but you're not going to stick with it long term. Okay. So the way that I view the gym and that I view exercise, because I'm going to tell you right now, I don't always feel like getting up at 5 a.m. and going to the gym. I don't. But how I view it is that it is the most important thing for me to do that day. I call it paying yourself first. It comes before work. It comes before I'm up getting the kids ready for school. It happens at 5 a.m. That's why it's the first thing of the day. But I also see it as an opportunity to get better at hard things. I think there's benefits to your muscles and growing muscles and cardiovascular benefits to exercise. But I think there's a level of mental resilience that comes through doing hard things like trying to lift heavy weights. And, when do you quit? When do you throw in the towel? How do you push through it? How do you show up when you don't want to be there?
Yeah.
So that's kind of really honestly the biggest take home that I can give anybody listening right now.
And I'm sorry, I'm going to jump in there because that's so important. Michael Easter's book called The Comfort Crisis, I don't know if you've read it, but I think you should interview him on your podcast, talks exactly about this whole process of doing these things out of comfort. He talks about this thing of going out and doing something really, really hard. It builds resilience. It builds something physically, emotionally, and mentally. So it'd be he's got an incredible book. His audio book is brilliant, but I wanted to just drop that in.
Yeah, absolutely. But my training has evolved through the years, just like my diet. So I used to, you guys can't see it because my background is blurred out, but there's this like weightlifting trophy over my left shoulder. I was a 2-time lifter of the year at Nebraska. So we're talking kind of your normal Olympic lifts. So squatting, benching, hang clean, those types of things. When I went to medical school, I did a little stint of P90X and I was like, hitting the weights, but I really started to transition to just like a lot of cardio. I was doing the elliptical machine. After my second daughter was born, I was like, oh, I got to get this baby weight off. I think I'm going to sign up for a half marathon. So I was just running a half an hour up to like 2 hours at a time to train for this half marathon. And I look back now at the pictures and like my body composition, I'm still very fluffy, right? And I'm like running half marathons. And then after my third daughter was born, I was doing like some kickboxing and some pure bar classes, but like I had really almost kind of vowed when I left college that I wasn't going to lift again. And a lot of it, I know a woman listening right now will resonate that as I was a young girl growing up in the 80s and 90s, the society, the cultural, kind of view on women was that women, first of all, I call it like cocaine model chic. Like it was very skinny, no muscle, like that was like feminine beauty. And so I was always navigating as an athlete, like that I didn't fit in. Like my legs are too big. I don't want to look too big. I don't want to look too bulky, like what every woman says, like when somebody tells them to start lifting weights. So I had really like on purpose stayed away from weights for a really long time. And then after I got my diet back in a good place, I had a come to Jesus with myself that I really need to start lifting again. And so in 2018 was when I got back into lifting weights more regularly. And I was doing a lot of HIIT back then. And now I've really realized that we're overdoing a lot of the high intensity things. Like true HIIT, like true sprint training should be done for like a very short amount of time. But I was going to a gym where they had these like hour-long HIIT sessions. And I mean, I was going hard for an hour. And I realized that that just wasn't sustainable. Like I want to live a really long time. So my training now, I lift really heavy on Mondays. So, and then on Tuesdays, I do a little bit more accessory type movements. Wednesdays, I do a little bit more recovery. And then on Thursdays, I do heavy again. So full body, but I'm back to like, hex bar deadlifts. And I'm trying to do lifting techniques that reduce risk of injury. Like I don't want to get injured. Like a lot of people ask me if I do CrossFit and I don't. And I'm a surgeon. So like I can't tear a shoulder. I can't, like my profession, I can't get disabled.
Yeah.
So,
Got
so
you.
I am cautious in that. I'm cautious in that regard, but I do some sprinting. I try new things. I added kettlebells this last year to try to kind of, change things up because we do kind of get bored, after a period of time. And so I'm always trying to kind of find new things, but I do dedicated weight training, 4 times a week. But I also have prioritized recovery.
Sure. Sounds incredible. Now, how do you marry the research on VO2 max? I do this high intensity once a week for about 30 minutes, really push as hard as I can, zone 5. We call it the almost puke session, doing that once a week.
Yeah.
And I'm training 4 times a week in the gym. I'm doing a lot of heavy weights 4 times a week. And I've gained a lot of lean muscle mass because I was a Comrades runner, which is a 56-mile race. It's the biggest long ultra distance race, 11 Comrades in a row, probably 40,000 Ks on the clock that I've done. And over the last, since the pandemic, I've spent more time in the gym and put on a lot of size, 7 kgs of lean muscle mass. Now, muscle being the longevity organ, how do you marry ensuring that you've got this high VO2 max, which is crucially important for health span and longevity, with making sure that your body composition is good and you've got enough lean muscle mass?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to find your happy balance. And I think most athletes are on one end of the spectrum and there's not many that are in the middle. You got the friend that she's a runner and she just runs all the time, right? And then you got the the guys in the gym or they're just lifting to get their biceps as big as they can. They're just on a hypertrophy program, but let me tell you, you would beat them in a foot race down the block. So there is kind of this balance of making sure that you're maintaining good cardiovascular health, but you don't want to overtrain in one direction. You have to kind of find that middle ground. And I think it's individualized, I do have a lot of concern about, ultra endurance and endurance athletes. I do think it creates a lot of oxidative stress. I think that, we've kind of found in some of the literature, everybody's heard of the guy that drops dead of a heart attack in the middle of the marathon, right? He was like the picture of health. He was the runner and he just like dropped dead of a heart attack and all of his arteries were clogged. Like, how does that happen? There's certainly some genetic susceptibility there, but I think that, I think you can overtrain. I think you can overtrain in levels 2, 3, 4, 5. I do think that there's cardiovascular benefit to weightlifting. So, I mean, if you're lifting, like I lift on a clock. So like I'm at intervals, like as soon as the clock hits, I'm on to my next set. I think when you lift in that fashion, there's definitely a cardio. I mean, I'm breathing hard. If you're taking like really long rest periods because you're trying to really maximize, growth, you're not getting that cardiovascular benefit. So I think for everybody, it's just, figuring out where you can get it in. I do more like level 5, just sprinting for really short period. Like I usually do like 8 intervals, like all out until I need to die and stop. And I do about 8 intervals of those at the end of a lifting workout. So I just incorporate it that way. I don't have a dedicated day.
Brilliant. But what you are saying, which I agree with, which is more women need to do a lot more weight training. And this is not just doing burpees and push-ups. This is lifting
Yep.
weights, ensuring
Yep.
that have the correct body composition. In fact, you said something in a podcast was interesting. If people want to lose fat, visceral body fat, and you need to actually lift weights. You need to increase your
Yeah.
muscle size and strength. Is that correct? Maybe you want to unpack that.
The fastest way to lose fat is to build muscle. So muscle is very metabolically active. And if you want to lose fat, if you just focus on building muscle, you will almost always lose fat. If you control your calories in a sense, right? You can overeat.
Yeah.
But we are so focused on losing fat that I'm over fat. We are so focused on the weight on the scale, which tells you nothing about body composition. And so I think for most people, I'm a huge fan of getting a body composition scan, getting a DEXA scan of some kind, and figuring out how much lean mass you have, how much fat you have, where the fat is it subcutaneous or visceral fat? Because some people may have a normal BMI, might have a normal waist circumference, but they have fatty infiltration of their muscle tissue. So they don't even have healthy muscle tissue. Maybe they have a lot of muscle tissue because they're big and they've had to carry that frame around their whole life, but they might have really unhealthy muscle tissue. So it's not just how much muscle you have. People get obsessed too with, I can't gain any lean mass. Well, if that tissue you have is healthy, if the lean tissue you have is healthy, that's important too. But visceral fat, which is the fat that lies deep down around our organs, is very dangerous. It increases the risk of all-cause mortality and, of any kind, cancer, heart disease, you name it. And so I think body composition is a much better indicator of what's going on with your health. And I think women in particular should use it more. And you should focus on gaining muscle. That is the fastest way to lose fat.
Brent, maybe you can just give us sort of a little bit of a biochemical sort of interpretation of having IGF-1. And I know a lot of the longevity specialists like David Sinclair saying you want that pretty low. You want cyclic AMPK kicking in quite a lot. And now you got mTOR. Now you're trying to build. I've noticed my insulin has increased dramatically. It used to be between 3 and 5, my fasting insulin, I was pretty lean. I put on a lot of size, but my insulin has increased, probably to 8, 9. So maybe give us sort of an understanding of when you build muscle, firstly, it's not going to cause, metabolic issues. IGF-1, your view on that, because I think that's important. It's a question I ask often, and I get so many different answers about having IGF-1 on the higher side, on the lower side, what we should be doing with mTOR. And there's just a lot of confusion from a longevity perspective when you're stimulating your body to build muscle.
So the most simple answer to that is homeostasis. The body wants homeostasis. The body wants the ability to perpetuate its DNA, to keep its species alive, to reproduce. And it likes homeostasis. So just like everything, just like the temperature in our body, the pH of our blood, everything in our body, it is trying to find that middle ground. It doesn't want to swing one way or the other. And that is the answer when it comes to IGF. That's the answer when it comes to mTOR. It's not too much and not too little. So, you could say, well, we want to suppress these things because that's going to keep us alive the longest. Well, when you do things that suppress those things, you're going to lose lean body mass. You're going to become frail. You're going to be more likely to fall and break your hip. If you go the other way and you're constantly, stimulating mTOR, high insulin, high IGF, well, now you're increasing your risk of cancer. You're increasing, maybe you have too much lean mass and you're putting too much pressure on the cardiovascular system. So the real answer is homeostasis. It's finding the middle ground between caloric restriction, feeding and fasting. The body wants homeostasis.
Okay, brilliant. Well said. Let's move on to your nutrition. So you're waking up at 5. Tell us if you're taking a smoothie. I've seen a lot of patients now taking way too much processed proteins in the forms of whey proteins and BCAAs, the literature on essential amino acids, what you're doing with regards to your own training, meals that you might be replacing with sort of meal replacements. What does your nutrition look like on a daily, weekly basis?
So, I actually work out fasted in the morning. I have played with, you know, doing 10 grams of pre-workout carbs. I do try to get protein after my training sessions, but whole food amino acids are always better than BCA, better than a whey protein supplement. And so I prioritize getting whole food protein and a lot of it. Really, I would say that the most important meal is the first meal of the day. It's called breakfast, break fast. And so whenever that meal happens for you, whether you're intermittent fasting until noon or whether you're doing it right when you wake up in the morning, I do think we were probably made as a species to eat earlier in the day. And culturally, like in America, we tend to eat a lot later in the day. Like the largest meal tends to be dinner. And I think we kind of have that backwards a little bit. But that very first meal of the day should have 30 to 50 grams of protein. And for people who aren't used to prioritizing protein, that seems like an insurmountable number. That seems really high. And that's because foods that are high in carbs and fat are really easy to find, especially in combination. Think of any food that is like an ultra addictive processed food, like a donut. It's just carbs and fat, right? I could name them over and over and over and over again. But when it comes to protein, right? Like chicken, beef, eggs, salmon, those things aren't readily shelf stable available. So when it comes to protein, it's something you really have to kind of advance plan for. Our family cooks up 6 to 7 pounds of beef on like Sundays so that we just have it in the fridge. It's ready to go so that when I come home from the gym, I could eat it whole, I could eat it cold, I could heat it up, I could throw 2 eggs in it. It takes away a lot of decision fatigue. That's what I call it. But you really have to think about where your protein is going to come from because it's not easy to find. But that first meal of the day. Now, if you, for some reason, let's say you're traveling or you, for some reason, you can't get that whole food protein, that's where a leucine, a BCA, you want to take them all together so that it's best to get all those amino acids. We need them in specific ratios. Specifically, there's a leucine threshold that's needed. You could fill the gap, but amino acids are meant to be put into the system quickly. So like you don't want to sip on a protein shake, for instance. If you're going to do that, you want to like slam it down or you want to add it to the meal. So if you can only get 20 grams of protein with the meal, you could add the additional 20 to 30 grams, from a supplement. But really, if you're eating enough whole food protein, you don't need those things. There's no evidence for EAAs, BCAAs. There's not if you're getting adequate amino acids in your diet from whole foods. And like I said, they're more bioavailable. You're getting other things. Like when you eat beef, you're getting, collagen, you're getting other nutrients and micronutrients in that food. So it's always best to get it from whole foods. And then the last meal of the day, before you go to bed, before you go 8 hours, just laying in bed, resting and repairing is another time. That last meal of the day is another time to get those amino acids in there. What happens in between is probably less important. But I think if you are trying to optimize your body composition, trying to eat between 0.8 and 1.2 grams per pound of your ideal body weight is a great place to try to hit. It's hard to do for a lot of women, especially.
Yeah. And do you find that's a problem? I find the women really battle to get the protein in. A lot of them, I think, have problems with their gut to digest a lot of protein. They don't feel, good on it, and they become more alkaline than they should, and they struggle, and they get a lot of gut issues. Do you find that as well, that they really struggle to digest the protein, or is this sort of just the way they were brought up?
Well, I do find that in a handful of patients, but I would say where most of my female patients struggle is that they are, for the first time in their life, experiencing the satiety effect of eating this amount of protein. And once they feel that satiety effect, they're like, I hit 100 grams today. I can't hit any more than this. I feel like I'm stuffing myself because they're finally feeling what satiety feels like. I would say that's honestly where most of my patients struggle. But you're right. Some of these people are so metabolically broken as they get older, the gastric pH is changing. They may have some underlying dysbiosis that's been going on for years. We have to remember that fixing these health problems, although things sometimes can improve quickly, they take weeks to months to years of consistency to repair and heal the body.
Brilliant. Tell us about the rest of your nutrition through the week. Do you let your hair down now and then and just sort of let go? We're always looking at sustainability, sustainable transformation, people making it a lifestyle. Generally I let my hair down, and I don't like to use the word cheat because it's not really a cheat. I'm
Yeah.
choosing, I'm not cheating anyone, but
Yeah.
twice a week, 2 meals out of my 14, probably maybe out of my 18, I'm letting my hair down. What does your diet look like the rest of the week?
Yeah, I'm not perfect, so I absolutely make uh, a a well thought through decision sometimes to eat something that's not part of my normal everyday plan, and I think that's okay. I think that when you take care of yourself, that those type of things, you have so much resilience that, one meal, one bite of this here or there is not going to cause, a lot of harm. Now, the one thing I will say with dietary excursions is that if you are low carb or ketogenic most of the time, your pancreas is not primed for a large bolus of insulin. So if you are low carb and ketogenic, and then you say, you know what, I'm going to let my hair down on Saturday. I'm going to eat all the carbs. I'm going to have ice cream. I'm going to have some chips and salsa. We're going to go to the Mexican joint. I'm going to have, rice and tortillas, whatever it is, whatever your carbohydrate of choice is. When you eat a large amount of carbohydrates, when you haven't normally eaten that amount, your body can't keep up and you can get severe hyperglycemic numbers. And then your body will try to catch up with the insulin, and then you get these hypoglycemic events. So my recommendation, if you're going to have a planned dietary excursion, or if I have some patients that say, I'm going to go on vacation, and I've done this too. I'm going to go on vacation. I'm going to the resort. I'm going to try the local natural food. I'm going to have some, fish and ceviche, but I might want to try more fruits and mangoes and things like that. If you're going to do that, you want to add a few carbs back in the day before kind of that happens. You can kind of prime your pancreas in 24 hours, but you don't want to just go have this one big blow up carb sugar meal.
Okay.
First of all, you're going to feel like garbage, but I do think it's okay to do those things. I think that there are some people though that have addiction issues. And I have found patients where one meal will literally derail them for months. And I think that that's more of a mental health issue than anything, and your relationship with food. But absolutely, here and there, I let my hair down, I
Okay.
have some fun, I get right back on track the next day.
Okay. And on the daily basis, are you having 50 grams of carbohydrates? Are you eating the butternuts and the sweet potatoes and pumpkins, or what do your macros look like?
Yeah, so I did a bodybuilding competition last year and I was very much ketogenic. So we're talking like less than 20 grams of carbs. And then after my bodybuilding competition, I've now worked on trying to build as much lean mass as I can. And I'm more probably towards like 40 to 50 grams of carbs. I have gone over that, but I've just really found that it doesn't add a lot of benefit. And sometimes I'm not as good at hitting my protein and fat when I add more carbs in, and it tends to mess with my satiety a little more. So my kind of happy place, honestly, would be probably no more than 60 grams, which is like 20 grams, with 3 meals. And these are of course whole food carbs. I'm not eating sugar. It's like blueberries and sweet potatoes, cassava,
Mm.
those types of things. And of course, there's always a few minuscule carbs and dairy and other things like that.
Brilliant. Just to finish on nutrition, your concerns on the ketogenic diet, there have been patients over the years that have been on a ketogenic diet and the apolipoprotein B numbers have skyrocketed. What are your thoughts that people need to just really watch, possibly from their labs or any other data points that they're going to be concerned about?
Well, I'll tell you a little, people may not know about this, but there is some research happening with this kind of population of patient. We call these lean mass hyperresponders. So the real question here is ApoB, LDL cholesterol, is it a major driver of atherosclerosis? Because we know from children born with familial genetic conditions that have excessive amounts of this, I mean, they have heart attacks like at age 5, right? The difference is that in those children that have a genetic problem like that, they have abnormal lipid metabolism. So let's compare that to a 50-year-old man who has a normal fasting glucose, a normal fasting insulin. He's got a great HDL, he's got low triglycerides, but he has an LDL cholesterol of 250. Is that the same patient? Is that abnormal lipid metabolism, or has lipid metabolism maintained normalcy and there's no risk, right? That's the big question that we're trying to answer here. Well, Dave Feldman, who interestingly enough is not a doctor, he's an engineer, has been looking at this, and there's new data coming out. It's actually coming out very soon here, like in the next couple of weeks. I don't know when this is being released, but the preliminary data, which was actually shared at Low Carb Denver this last year, I think is going to kind of flip this narrative a little bit and open this conversation, because what they found, and this actually has a very personal meaning to me because I haven't shared a lot about it because I'm still collecting data, but my own husband, when we started the ketogenic diet, he didn't have a lipid derangement, but he had a grandfather that dropped dead in his 50s of a heart attack. We got a coronary calcium scan on my husband, and at a very young age, in his young 30s, he had a high CAC score.
Sure.
We have since rescanned him since being on a ketogenic diet now for, somewhat 8 years. And there's no coronary calcium. There's none. It's 0. He has a CCTA, which basically looks for soft plaque. That study's coming up here in about a week. He's going to get scanned. But looking at Dave's data and kind of, what's going on, I think that we don't know the whole story about lipid metabolism, especially on ketogenic diets. The traditional pathogenesis of cardiovascular disease is clearly low quality fats, lots of sugar and carbs in the diet, lack of exercise, high visceral fat. I don't think we know the whole story about ApoB and LDL. I think time will tell here, but from what I'm seeing in this preliminary data, basically, is that these patients, they're older. There was more men, so we should be able to find atherosclerosis in these patients. And what they found in the studies is they couldn't. They have high LDL, and they couldn't find atherosclerosis in these patients. So there's definitely some individual genetic susceptibility here. But I think we're going to find out a lot in the next few years.
I know that you had Dr. Michael Twyman, the cardiologist. I had him on the podcast as well, talking about, particle number and size, the lipoprotein B number and the size. They had Prof. Noakes on as well, the size being very important, your VLDL very important. So it's probably less a cholesterol issue, but possibly a particle problem. But it'd be interesting to get those, that data when it comes out. That'll be very important. Okay, so you're a very busy mom. You now have eaten. What about your kids? Who's taking them to school? You're now going to the practice. You're doing surgeries. What else are you doing? I mean, include your biohacks. Are you fasting? Are you doing sauna? Are you doing cold plunge? Are you wearing red, blue blocking glasses? I mean, it's such a long, beautiful continuum. And a lot of these things are great hormetic stresses, but how do you fit them in without becoming so obsessed about getting all these things done on a daily and weekly basis?
Yeah. So all the little biohacks, I do them where I see fit. So I red light a couple times a week when it fits in my schedule. It's not like if I miss a day, something bad's going to happen to me. But I have a red light in my closet. So sometimes I'll go in there and either meditate, do breath work. Sometimes I'm checking emails and just trying to be efficient. I rarely remember to put my blue light blocking glasses on, but I really should. I do use a lot of computers. And so specifically like in the evening hours, I should be better about that. I got a pair right here. Maybe I should just put them on while we're doing the podcast. We don't own a sauna or like a fancy cold plunge in our house right now. So thankfully I actually don't have like great access, but we're building a new space in our house where we will have it. But I think, like you're mentioning, these are hormetic stressors. You can overdo them. Remember when I said homeostasis, you can overdo them. And I had Susanna Soberg on, my podcast, and like with cold plunge, you don't need more than like 11 minutes a week. And with sauna, I want to say she said it was like 50 minutes a week. So they're getting popular. They're on social media, but just remember these things can be overdone too. But I wake up at 5 a.m. I train. Sometimes I'm at the hospital by 7 a.m. doing surgery. If I'm not, then sometimes I do get to take my kids to school. It is rare, but sometimes I do. And then I see patients most of the day, 4 days a week. And then in the evenings, my kids have activities. And I am at a point in my life where I say no to a lot of things because I want to be a mom. And it's very important for me to be, an example for my kids. Um, and that work-life balance and creating boundaries for your health. I could easily overbook and overextend myself. And for a while, it was really hard for me to say no to certain opportunities, but I have to maintain my sanity. So I do say no to a lot of things for that exact reason. Um, Before the pandemic, we used to vacation a lot because vacation is actually very good for your health. People who vacation regularly live longer. So my husband and I are getting back into that, and it gives you something to look forward to. I do love my job. I love delivering babies, but sometimes you just need a break.
Yeah, of course. Okay. And fasting, is that underrated or overrated, do you think? Because I mean, there's just been this
Yeah.
continuum, and I've fasted less and less, especially multiple day fasts over the years, and I've got my patients to fast less and less. Although I think once or twice a week can really be beneficial to make you
Yeah.
metabolically flexible. So, what are your thoughts there?
I think it's a good tool. Like all the things we've mentioned can be overdone. When I first started the ketogenic diet, I was doing tons of fasting, intermittent fasting, 3 to 5 day fasts. I do a lot less fasting now. And some of it is that now I'm metabolically healthy and I'm at a good body composition. So, like, why do I need to do that? I'm
Mm,
trying to build muscle. It could be counterintuitive to what my goals are. I do think occasionally I will sometimes just throw in a 24-hour fast. Or
okay.
if I had a little let my hair down on Saturday night, the next day, I might fast for 24 hours and dump my glycogen and get back into, a good state. I think that is good on occasion. I do think
Yeah.
that is good for our bodies on occasion. But it's just a tool. It's not magic.
Mm.
I do think it helps patients create caloric balance. When you tell somebody they can only eat in a certain window, it kind of gives them a guideline in which to kind of follow. But it's just a tool, and it's right for some people and it can be overdone in some situations.
Great. I'm going to get a lot of questions through because I know I want to maximize the time here. But body composition for women and men, what are we looking at? Lean muscle mass and fat. I think that's very important. You said you're using the DEXA, not easily available here in South Africa, but we've got bioimpedance machines in that, which are probably
Yeah.
less accurate, but precise, making the same errors, as you do them. But so what are you looking at numbers wise, body composition wise?
Yeah, bioelectrical impedance is great too. It is more widely available. You do have to remember in menstruating women, there can be more variance because of free body water changes during the menstrual cycle, depending on how much estrogen and progesterone. You have to make sure you're testing at the same time of day, make sure you're, in the same fasted state or you haven't trained. So keep as many variables as you can the same if you're tracking this data over time. But the unfortunate truth for some women listening is that we all want to be like really lean, but women as a reproductive species, normal body fat levels could be anywhere from 20 to 32%, which sounds really high for a lot of people. I love to be like 16, 17%, but I have noticed as my body fat gets below that 20% threshold, my menstrual cycle starts to shorten. And that is a sign to me that my follicular phase is shortening, my estrogen is going down a little bit, and I want the benefits of that. So even though my brain thinks I should look a certain way, 20% body fat is probably healthy, right? And put up that on the flip side. I've had patients come into my clinic with 30% body fat. I check all their labs. They are perfectly metabolically healthy. They don't have visceral fat, but they have 30% subcutaneous fat. And so for women, we naturally carry more body fat. Men can definitely be leaner than women. You know, you'll see the bodybuilder men get into single digits, but men could be in the upper singles, they could be in the teens, and still be very metabolically healthy. But women by nature have more subcutaneous fat. When it comes to muscle, we don't have as many markers. For fat, we use body fat percentage, we use waist circumference, we use BMIs. For muscle, the real question is like, what's the healthy amount of muscle to have? But like I mentioned earlier, you can have actually a decent amount of lean tissue, and it can be really unhealthy lean tissue that's been infiltrated by fatty infiltration. It's metabolically within the endocrine system, could be, even causing inflammation once that fatty infiltration occurs. So we don't know the correct number, but I would say get a scan, use it as objective data to make sure that you're at least maintaining your lean body mass through the decades. When you're in your younger decades, try to grow it, as much as you can, because it takes a really diligent effort. Like, it's not easy unless you're going to go on steroids or something like that.
Yeah.
But if you're just doing it through diet and lifting, like, it takes dedicated consistency to put on lean mass.
Brilliant. I want to talk about hormones because I've been doing functional medicine 17 years now, and testosterone is on the decrease, both male and female. I think the last 20 years has been a drop of 50% from baseline levels. It's a real concern for me. And women are coming here with their children, and they 12, 13-year-old, these young girls, and they've got acne, and they've got skin issues, and they've got estrogen dominance issues, and they're just going on the contraceptive pill as a matter of course. So they're on it for many, many years. You got 3 girls. I've got a beautiful little girl. She's 7. I'm really concerned about what's happening with just giving hormones. I know your view on HRT, and I think it's really a balanced view. And I think there's a lot of nuance there. So take us through, your daughters are growing up now. What are you going to do? Are you going to give them the contraceptive pill? When are you going to start them on any, contraception or any type of hormones? I'd love to hear your view and unpack that.
Yeah, so we definitely have a lot of hormonal derangements happening at all decades of our life. And a lot of it is lifestyle. It's lack of sunlight. It's poor sleep. We're using too many stimulants. We're not getting enough nutrients. There's a variety of reasons why our modern world has created so much endocrine disruption, the chemicals and things like that too. So, when we think about young girls, we're seeing girls start their periods way younger. So we're seeing 8, 7, 8, 9-year-old girls now starting their periods, which is not normal. This has been a trend over the last few decades. In women and young girls, we're seeing a lot more PCOS, or polycystic ovarian syndrome, which there's certainly probably a genetic susceptibility, but I do think that it is a disease of insulin resistance. And I think sometimes, is it PCOS, or is it just peripheral insulin resistance, or is it somewhere in between? It doesn't really matter. The treatment is the same. But unfortunately, when a girl comes in just complaining of irregular periods, the most, common thing she's offered is to just put her on a birth control pill and just turn off the system. And although there actually are some benefits to oral contraceptives for people with PCOS, because it can help drive down their free androgens, and it can protect their endometrium, because these patients are at an increased risk of hyperplasia and endometrial cancer. It's not fixing, the reason that they had the problem in the first place, and long term can cause a lot of issues. But you don't have a lot of doctors that are well versed in how to fix it through lifestyle, which is unfortunate. So patients have to educate themselves. If you've got a daughter, you've got to do a little research. You've got to figure out how to advocate for your own child. And so I have 3 daughters, and none of them have hit puberty yet. My oldest is probably getting close. God bless my husband. Those years are coming for us. But I think that it's so important to talk to your young girls and your daughters about their bodies and empower them with how their bodies work. We can't be skirting around these issues. We have to teach them about their own anatomy, because if you don't, who's going to teach them? So my girls, I'm very forward, with the reproductive cycle. My 7-year-old can tell you how babies are made, how babies are born. I think when you feel as a parent that that's an appropriate conversation to have, you should have it. So when it comes to, contraception, unplanned pregnancies are also a very real thing in the United States, and can be very detrimental to someone's health. And so, figuring out what's best for each person is different. We definitely have non-hormonal forms of birth control, but unfortunately, hormonal birth control, women fall at the stake for this. I mean, there are side effects. There are long-term things to think about. We know oral contraceptive pills increase oxidative stress. They can deplete the body of zinc, selenium, magnesium. They can increase thyroid binding globulin. So there's always pros and cons. If you're using it for birth control, great. But we really should use a lot less of these things to, quote, control the period. And then as women get into their reproductive years, if they haven't fixed the problems from their teens and 20s, now they're trying to get pregnant and now they can't get pregnant. Half the time it's female, half the time it's male. And some of the time we don't know what it is, but we are seeing declining rates of fertility as well. And then after people go through their fertility years, they enter perimenopause and menopause. And this conversation, the pendulum is really swinging towards hormone replacement therapy being offered to many more women, which is a really good conversation to have, because although we're unhealthy, we actually are living longer. So women are living a lot more years of their life postmenopausally. And if we want to think about longevity and quote unquote being hard to kill, although it is a natural process, or it's offered to men much more than women, and hormone replacement in women, it's good for their heart, their brain, and their bones. So it's not just about hot flashes and night sweats and vaginal dryness. There are definitely benefits within 10 years of menopause to consider estrogen replacement and sometimes testosterone replacement. And in the US, there is 0 forms of FDA-approved testosterone replacement for women. None. There's none.
Wow.
So yeah, it's all off-label use. You have to get, compounded, or they have to pay cash for some male formulation. So it's really sad, what is available to women and what's not. So ladies, take it into your own hands, take care of yourself, lift weights, eat healthy, have a discussion, protect your hormones. There's no, you can't go get a lab test. I do want to mention this really quickly. I get a lot of consults that say, I want you to check my hormones. You have to understand that the endocrine system, your hormone levels are going to fluctuate throughout the day. They're going to fluctuate day to day. They're going to fluctuate week to week, depending where you're at in the menstrual cycle. It's really hard to do a lab test and identify a hormonal derangement that isn't complete deficiency of something. We call that like hypogonadism, like you're in premature menopause, right? Or a male has, testicular atrophy and hypogonadism. It's hard to find a problem checking hormones by labs in that fashion. And I see people get tested all the time, salivary testing, serum testing. And I'm not saying I don't test hormones. I do sometimes, but they have to be tested, a lot of times, at the same time, or at a specific part of the menstrual cycle. But really, if you want to quote unquote balance your hormones out, take care of your body, get good sleep, eat an appropriate diet, train, but don't overtrain.
Yeah.
Figure out ways to be resilient from emotional, psychological stresses in your life. Try to get rid of the chemicals, drink out of stainless steel instead of plastic.
Yeah.
Those types of things is what is going to help your body produce the hormones that it's supposed to be producing.
Brilliant. Good summary. And hopefully maybe in the future we can have a full podcast on that, because there's so much confusion with regards to bioidentical hormones and HRT and that. But I just want to really thank you for your time. I want one last question, because you're a fearless warrior. We're going to put the links to all, your website and your Instagram, Dr. Fit and Fabulous. You look like a real warrior. When I asked Dr. Jamie this question, what do you fear?
I'm claustrophobic. I don't like tight spaces. So whenever I die, you guys just set me off into the wide open spaces. Okay.
Cool.
No,
right.
I mean, I fear not living a fulfilled life.
Okay.
I think if you ask people that are dying, like the regrets that they have is like not telling people they loved them as much as they did, like really basic things. I think we're overthinking this the vast majority of the time. And we're guilty of that in the health and wellness space. We just got to get back to the basics.
Brilliant. Well, I declare favor and blessing over you, Dr. Jamie. Thank you so much for your time, your calling. You're a courageous woman. You're an inspiration to many. And I think you're just inspiring women to lift weights and be strong and get out there and live a full life and a thriving life. So thank you so much. You've got a home here in South Africa. Would love to have you if you ever travel, because it looks like you like to travel. My mentor sits in Fort Myers in Florida. So if I'm out there, and hopefully we can hook up. Thank you for your podcast and the work you're doing. I know you probably got so much on your plate, and when you're delivering babies, it's unplanned, and it's it breaks your schedule, and it's almost like shift work. So yeah, just deeply lots of gratitude, and say thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.